La venta de un día en Macy's es ahora, con ofertas del día increíbles en básicos para la vuelta a la escuela que necesitan ahora, como un 40-50% menos en ropa para niños y juniors, 25-50% menos en mochilas, bolsos y accesorios, y ahorra un 40% en pequeños electrodomésticos de Bella, Crocs y más para preparar su dormitorio. Además, descarga la aplicación para aún más ofertas del día increíbles en Macy's. Ahorro sobre precios en oferta y liquidación, aplican excepciones.
What's going on, spectators? Thanks for tuning in for the latest episode of Spec Tales. I'm your Geek on the Mic host, Jake, along with my ruggedly bearded geek co-host, Jesus.
Man, ruggedly bearded geek, huh? I think that's an oxymoron, but I'm not gonna shy away for it, man. I'm just gonna lean into it. I'll take it.
Just let the beard do its thing, man. Just let it do its thing.
I will, man. A bearded geek. I like it.
All right, for all you new listeners out there, thanks for lending us your ear holes for a bit. Spec Tales is a comic book podcast that asks collectors and creators, what's your Grail tale? Each week, we explore new stories about the comic book grails we love, the epic journeys behind how they were obtained, or how they inspired new creativity.
And we also dive into some comic book speculation and how, as collectors, we can help the hobby pay for itself.
I don't want to put too much pressure on us this week, Jesus, but this might be the most important episode in the history of our lives.
Oh man, for sure. Definitely in at least this lifetime. This is pretty important. This is pretty big time.
This is the week, man. This week, I mean, Mark Waid, that we got to say it. Mark Waid. We spoke to Mark Waid and it's still kind of blowing my mind. And dude, Mark Waid came packing with information, including some for like jaw-dropping speculation news. I was not expecting that.
No, I was not either, man. I think he kind of like put us and our speculation to shame, which is, I mean, if you look back at it, it's kind of expected. He's been in the game for how long?
Oh.
So, yeah, man, it was awesome.
But before we get into the Mark Waid conversation, we got to tell you about our brand new Patreon. Literally just went live today. Last week we previewed it and we ended up getting messages from people wanting to sign up, but it wasn't available yet. I actually could not believe that either. Now it is actually live. Thanks to everybody who reached out to us already and who are already signing up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We love all you diehard spectators out there and producing content for the comic community. Subscribing to our Patreon for $3.99 per month supports what we're doing right now, like a conversation with Mark Waid about his Grail tale, and also allows us to produce even more content.
That's right, man. And for $3.99, which is literally the cost of adding one book to your monthly pull list, this is what you're getting in return. Access to a new monthly podcast series that we're doing. We're calling it Floppies. Access to the Scarce Army Book Club Discord channel. A monthly Spec Tales newsletter filled with articles, insider info, and speculation books. And every month, we're going to be shipping out an awesome AOK to a randomly selected Scarce Army member every month.
If you want to learn more about supporting the show on Patreon by joining the Scarce Army, head over to Patreon and just search Spec Tales, or you can click the link in the show notes. All right, everything's buttoned up. We are ready to get to this episode. Jesus, are you ready for Mark Waid?
No. I wasn't, man, but I did my best.
I was not expecting that. All right. Well, let's get into it. So never admit to an iconic writer you don't care for Superman, and always remember to slap your sidekick. This is episode 33.
This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Just begging to course its way through your veins.
Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
You're into comic books, aren't you?
I'm a nerd.
But you do like comic books.
Comic books aren't just for sad nerds anymore.
Do you think we need one more?
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Do you think we need one more?
Objection, calls for speculation, move to strike.
This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
All right, we'll get one more.
Spec Tales, a comic book podcast with Jake and Jesus.
Welcome back again, all you spectators. This week, Jesus and I are extremely excited to be joined by the one and only Mr. Mark Waid. Mark, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today.
My pleasure today. No problem.
Before, Jesus, I know you want to say hello to Mark Waid yourself as well.
Hello, Mark Waid. How are you doing on Mark Waid Day?
Little fawning is good, but be my guest. So.
Well, we'll hold the applause to the end of the show. I think
fair enough. All good.
So, Mark, probably the most important question, and that's why it's the first thing we're going to ask. First thing we're going to say is, have you learned to put staples in comics yet?
If I could learn it, I would have everything if I had that, right? If I knew the stapling machine, I'd be it.
You'd be the 5-tool man.
To the fact that I've literally done everything in comics, from store owner to colors to artist to letter to production guy to the guy who editor, publisher, everything. So yeah, my line now is that I'm the only thing I haven't done is put the staples in the comics.
It's a fantastic line, although I do think that you could handle it. My opinion would be that you could do it.
I'm a big believer that the more you know about everything in your field, the better it makes you at everything in your field.
Absolutely.
It makes you better knowing more about Photoshop makes me a better writer because I know the kind of things that an artist can achieve. And that kind of stuff just feeds onto each other.
Well, I think that makes you absolutely. It makes you a better publisher, makes you a better editor. All of it. Speaking of all the hats that you've worn, while you, of course, need no introduction to anybody remotely knowledgeable about comics, let's talk real quick about Humanoids. So you are the publisher at Humanoids,
I
right?
am the publisher of Humanoids, yeah. And I've been for a couple of years now.
Yep, and I know it's been documented quite a bit, but I guess I wanted to ask you, not to pick a favorite, but you've worn a lot of hats. You said it yourself. You've done everything but put the staples in. How do you approach every one of those jobs differently, or is it the same Mark Waid coming to the table?
I think it's the same Mark Waid coming to the table, is because the key to it all is collaboration. The key to it all is listening to the people that you're working with, whether it's the artist that's working on your script or whether or not it's the assistant editor who's working under you as a publisher. Just listen. It's a collaborative medium.
Yeah.
And I don't care what aspect of this medium you're working in, whether it's business or creative, it's a collaborative medium. And so that's how I approach all of it.
And you feel yourself just as invested in what you're working on when you're the publisher versus if you're the editor or the writer, even, where it birthed from your brain, in a sense?
Yeah, I have to. My name's on it at the end of the day, and my name's somewhere on it. So I want to feel good about it.
I think that's a fair point, that your name is on it and you take a lot of pride in that. So cool. I wanted to start with that because we're going to jump into our normal segments, but I thought it was important to really establish for all of our listeners out there that want to know all the hats you've worn and things like that to start this off. But we do have 3 basic segments, and I know we've briefly touched on it and I sent you some information on it, but for all those new listeners out there, we do 3 basic segments. We start with recent pickups, where we each will go around and we'll talk about something recent that we've purchased or read or just something that we've loved. And then we will move into, from there, the Grail Tale segment, where we will ask you, Mark, to provide us with a story or something about a Grail, your most prized possession within the comic realm. It can be a book or whatever. And then we always close. We have a lot of listeners who are not just collectors, but they like to help the hobby pay for itself. And therefore, everybody becomes a speculator in this industry a little bit. And so we always end with speculation to talk about maybe some items or books that may have some future value that our listeners could go out and find.
Gotcha.
Sound good to you?
Sounds good to me.
Perfect. All right, let's move right into that first segment.
Recent pickups.
Jesus, you're up first.
All right, man. So, obviously we have Mark Waid on, so I wanted to read some Mark Waid. I've read Mark Waid before. It's weird saying that, right? Like, I read Mark Waid before, and he's
all right.
He's just right here.
And some of the most iconic stuff or known stuff is like the Daredevil, the Flash, Kingdom Come, stuff of that nature. But I wanted to go a little bit different, so I picked up Ant-Man and Wasp from 2018, with the artist Javier Garron and Nakayama, I think, is the artist, I think, on the cover. So I got 1, 2, and 3. It's a 5-issue series, so I missed 4 and 5. I'm looking for 4 and 5 to finish it, but I read them, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and for me, I just think it's cool how it starts from something so small where he just wants to get home to his daughter for her birthday, and it turns into this crazy adventure in the microverse, which is also interesting because the microverse is something that's coming for the MCU but they, obviously call it the quantum realm,
right?
But it's just really cool. It's just a really cool space vampire-ish story on it. So I recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Ant-Man and Wasp 1, 2, 3, and then I'm missing 4 and 5. But this is my recent pickup. Nice.
I'm really proud of the way that came out. I'm really happy with that. I've been wanting to get my hands on a microscopic character for ever and ever because, I'm also a science geek on top of being a comics geek and big science nerd, and wanting to do stuff in the quantum realm and wanting to do stuff on a subatomic level and play around with concepts that are not just, well, look, here's an atom. It's a tennis ball with a bunch of other tennis balls revolving around it. And that's not what atoms look like. And, and getting more into quantum probability and stuff, and yet doing it in such a way where A, you're telling a story, and B, you're not losing the audience and it feels like homework. So I think we did that. And I really had a ball. And I love the relationship between Nadia and Ant-Man, who is not her dad.
Mr. Lang. It was, I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the things that stuck out for me is, what are you breathing if you're smaller than oxygen, right? Like it's just interesting how it changes when you're down that small. So I thought that was really cool. I thought that was really smart.
Yeah. What are you seeing if you're smaller than a photon? Exactly.
Yeah. So that's what I thought was very, I don't know, it just stuck with me. It was very cool. But
thanks.
And my question on this too is, how does this come to you? Like, do they say, hey, you want to do Ant-Man or hey, is that basically how it is?
That's basically how it is. At Marvel, the struggle is that by now I've done every character they've got. So it's, every year we try to look around and go, okay, what have I not? That's kind of why I'm not doing anything at Marvel right this second, is only because there's nothing really open right now that I haven't gotten my hands on at some point or another. And I don't really like to, there's some exceptions, but I really don't like to go back to stuff I've already done if I can help it. So Ant-Man came along. That was a perfect opportunity for me. I'd created Nadia with Alan Davis, the new Wasp. And so that was a good opportunity. And also everybody knows I'm a science geek, so I'm the guy to go to.
So you got to get your geek on in your writing. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Well, Mark, it is your turn for recent pickups. What have you? What are you thinking?
I don't have any visual aids, sadly, because I'm just almost all digital these days.
We're an audio medium anyway, so that's all right.
But there's certain things I'm following. I mean, I read the superhero comics, but I also read outside the superhero realm as much as I can, just because it always keeps me free. If I read nothing but superhero comics, everything's going to feel regurgitated. So I've got to have different genres and different points of view. Chris Somney is doing a book called Jonna and the Impossible Monsters.
Yes.
And for, I think, Oni, I'm not sure. And it's great. It's a ball. I mean, I know Chris from working on Daredevil with him, but boy, it's just him and, some prehistoric girls and a bunch of dinosaurs. And it's just fun. It goes by at a pretty good clip, but it's just fun when you read it. I'm a big fan of Mariko Tamaki's work. I really like what she's doing in Detective Comics over at DC. She wrote what my favorite of the Humanoids graphic. I'm not supposed to choose favorite Humanoids graphic novels, but my personal favorite, it was before I got there. It was called Louisa Then and Now. Okay. And it's just a beautiful, touching story about a woman who opens the door one day and there's her 16-year-old self just standing there. And neither of them can figure out what's going on, but it's not a wacky science time travel thing. It's more magic realism where we really get a complete explanation of what's going on. But in doing, as they try to figure out what's going on, they learn more about who they really are at whatever age. And it's just a very touching story. I love that book. And then over at Marvel, it's rare that I keep reading books that I've already worked on, because it's like seeing an old girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
It's awesome. Like, whatever they're doing on Captain America right now is great, but it's just awkward for me. But that said, I really dig what Dan Slott's doing on Fantastic Four. That's still a lot of fun.
Yes, I love Dan Slott's writing.
Yeah. And then, on that same note, I really like what Jeremy Adams is doing on The Flash. I really feel like, with no disrespect to anybody who's done it before in the last, 20 years or whatever, I really feel like, Josh Williamson, and he really got it, and really it feels like a Flash that I really know and feel tied to.
That, if you don't mind me interrupting, that actually
No.
reminds, or, brings up a question
I'm
I was going to ask
actually
you.
done. You're not interrupting. Go ahead.
So you yourself, obviously you've said you've covered all the characters, of course, but some of which were interpretations of yours, right? You made Wally, Wally West was your voice. It was you. And so you've said, and I wanted to actually ask you, how do you feel when you see people interpret characters you've created, right? Like, you launched them, you created a voice for these characters, and then you see them interpreted not just in books, but on the screen. Right. So do you get awkward about that?
No, there's two different things. Comics is a different thing. We'll come back to that in a second. Seeing them on the screen is always a huge delight. I mean, even if Impulse is now no longer 12, be 17 or whatever, I don't care. It's just seeing that costume on the screen and knowing I created that, or, Michael Ringo and I created that, or whatever. It feels like I've been able to add something substantial to the Flash mythos rather than just tape,
Yes.
Every time somebody says the word Speed Force, in a DC movie or TV show, I just grin from ear to ear. And it's always fun, even if it's, interpretations that don't quite jibe with how I see the characters. It's still kind of fun. In comics, I still enjoy and appreciate it. It is weird sometimes when some of the interpretations are not even remotely, the voice that I hear in my head when for the character I created, or the tone or whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm sure that there are, probably Flash writers who look at what I did and went, no, or, Captain America writers or Fantastic Four writers in the past who have looked at my stuff and gone, not. So it's just the way it is. And you have to roll with those punches if you're going to be in this field for a long time, because it's going to happen. Yeah. And you just have to accept that you can't really be militant and go in the public, eye and in the trade press and scream, oh, that's not my Impulse. They really screwed that up.
Yeah.
It just makes everybody look bad.
Yeah. Well, I could see that. And I could see that you don't, I mean, then you're just getting into, a garbage fight on Twitter.
Yeah.
Which you don't need.
Yeah. And nobody wins. Exactly.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thanks for humoring the question, because I genuinely was interested in just knowing, because there's been, with somebody like you who has created so many new things and characters within the universe, I always wanted to know, what does that feel like, and do you get awkward about it? So
when you see it pop up somewhere else, it always feels good. Even if it's not quite the interpretation you're looking for, it always feels good, because it feels like, oh, I created something that wasn't a wedding dress, right? I created something that wasn't something that I used once and put in the closet and nobody else is going to ever touch.
Yes. Well, that's how I really loved, not to get too far off the rails, but I really loved what you did with Abracadabra in Flash. I was a big fan of that. And that was something that I recently revisited and read, because before coming and doing this interview, I totally asked my friend who works at my LCS. I was just like, what's the quintessential Mark Waid to you? Which was a fun question to ask a lot of people, because nobody's was the same.
Nobody was the same. That's interesting. Okay.
Nobody's was the same. Yeah. And which we're gonna get to what mine is later. Right. That's a tease. But we'll but his was the Flash. And he immediately was just like, you have to read the Flash. I was like, I've already read it, but let's do it again. Nice. And I remembered going back through it. I was just like, oh, I remember Abracadabra. I love what you did with that character. So
Thanks.
But that's not my recent pickup. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you or to bring up. So I recently finished for my first time reading the Incal.
Yeah. Okay.
And I loved it. Of course, I am a sci-fi guy. Of course, sci-fi and horror are really my two favorite genres. I love superheroes, but if I'm reading something, it's usually sci-fi and horror. And the Incal kind of blew my mind because I read through it and everything felt so familiar, yet I had never read that book before.
Right. There had been so many. I mean, the thing is, it's been so influential to so many filmmakers over the years who admit it. But, if you saw The Fifth Element, I mean, my God, they just, took stuff lock, stock, and barrel out of the Incal. They took, in a lot of directors and a lot of people have just been influenced by that work, which is why it feels both familiar and new at the same time. If you're reading it just now, but it's still, it's one of the best-selling science fiction graphic novels ever printed. And it's still a story that holds up. Just a little background to people who've not heard of it. It's a big long form graphic novel. It's like 300 pages.
300 pages. Yeah, was the one I read.
Yeah. And it's done by the brilliant artist Mobius.
Was the artwork is gorgeous, and Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Yeah, Jodorowsky. Doing the script, and Jodorowsky is not well known here in the States, but in Europe, everybody knows him because he's a brilliant visionary poet, screenwriter, director, comics writer. He's just with unbridled creativity in whatever he wants to take on. So it's just a fun, challenging in some ways, but really interesting book about this down futuristic tale, this down on his luck detective who stumbles across this artifact that he doesn't know what to do with, and suddenly the entire universe is on his butt trying to get it from him, and he's on the run. And then it turns out to be a key to understanding, the origins of the universe. And so it becomes wilder and wilder as you go to different planets and meet different races, and it's just
the humor within the character, how he just wants to go home, like he just wants to go to a planet and relax, and they're just like, we're gonna do that. But could you do this one thing first? And I kept laughing because that joke keeps coming back. Like, no, we're totally going to do that. But could you do this? The beginning of the whole book, when they throw him over the edge of, this, what feels like almost a bottomless fall. And like, I immediately thought of the movie Dread.
Yes.
And again, everything in it, right from the start, I was like, this feels familiar. And the whole thing, but I loved it. The reason why I wanted to bring it up, though, was obviously Humanoids is the publisher for the Incal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct? Yeah. That was the version I read.
Yeah, like almost 40 years. Yeah.
And so one of two things. One, it's going to be interpreted into a movie. Taika Waititi is on to direct, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct.
And you guys have new Comic Book Day books coming out, 3 of them, right?
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit more about those? Because now having read it, I have to have more now.
Great. Yeah, we'll tease a little bit. I mean, we've got 3 original Incal related graphic novels coming out by some heavy hitting talent, because these are big projects and because, we want the best. It's not something we're going to crank out every month. The idea is we'll have 1 out by the end of the year and then 2 more out next year. But the first one right up is Mark Russell and Unique Paquette doing the Psychoverse, which is, again, part of the Incal mythology. And it's a really cool setup. The Psychoverse is a place where everything exists, until somebody in our universe thinks of it. And then it suddenly disappears from the Psychoverse. And so as we become more advanced, society, the more angry they get. And eventually it just becomes this big clash between the 2 universes. So, and Mark Russell's the guy. I mean, I will read anything more, when you get back to pickups, anything with Mark Russell's name on it, I am on like black on a bowling ball.
Nice.
So that's one. And then next year we've got, one by Dan Waters. And after that we've got, one, well, I don't want to say, I mean, don't give away too much, but
Well, I can't wait to take a look at those, or to take a look at the preview anyway, but get my hands on the books. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, and thanks for sharing that. The last thing I wanted to just to note, because of a book that I actually listed it as a recent pickup last week, but Chronophage. I picked it up and I read it, and I absolutely need more. I binged it in a night. I was just straight through it.
Yeah, it's a really good read. It is well written. It's beautifully illustrated by Elias. I mean, he does a terrific job. It's certainly one of the high water marks of my publishing reign here so far.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to thank you for it, because it really has been the last month. Just preparing to talk to you also turned me on to probably the best reading month I've had in a while. It was fantastic. I was chasing you in so many ways.
Great to hear. Okay.
All right. So that'll finish up for the recent pickup segment. We can move on to Jesus and I's absolute favorite segment of every episode.
Grail Tale.
Grail Tale.
Grail Tale.
Grail Tale. Grail Tale.
The Grail Tale segment. Mark, we have been looking forward to this for a while. I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Sure. Where do I start? I mean, I can't pick any one specific thing. It's just too hard. But there are a couple of things that mean a lot to me that I've managed to land, and then like a couple of white whales that I'm still looking for. But maybe the thing that, I mean, my answer changes a little bit every day from, this model bat cave to whatever, but there is a page of artwork that I found on eBay. And it relates to my favorite comic. My favorite comic of all time is Action Comics number 500 from 1980, which retells Superman's origin. And it's first person. So he's basically giving the story of his origin to a bunch of people going around the Superman Museum with him. And it's written by Marty Pasco. Now, Marty was a great writer, a really great Superman writer, and very influential on me in ways I didn't realize until years later, because there is a page in that book where he's just talking about his youth and talking about it was like growing up in Smallville and stuff. And there's a page devoted to him talking about Crypto, the dog from Krypton, that showed up when he was a teenage boy. And it's such a beautiful page. He's talking about the fact that he felt so alone before this, and now suddenly he had a companion that could, knew what the wind felt like as it blew in your face as you were flying through the air, or the sound that bullets make when they bounce off living flesh. Somebody to share that with. And I didn't realize really until much later, but that one page unlocked so much in me in my approach, because my approach to all these characters is always get inside their head and look at the world through their eyes, not just when they're punching stuff, but when they're just living, when they're just doing day-to-day things. What is the world? When I worked on Daredevil, I didn't go through a single day in my life without at some point sort of thinking where I was and going, I wonder how Matt Murdock would perceive this situation right now. If I'm working on Spider-Man, I'm just thinking about what is life like if you're Peter Parker and you're dealing with this stuff. And that's it to me. Like, that to me is the secret to writing these characters, is really knowing them personally. And so Marty set me up for that with that one page. And then years and years and years later, I was lucky enough on eBay just to stumble across that page, got it, and it hangs above my desk as a little reminder of, okay, this is why I do what I do.
That's incredible. I knew it was going to be Superman related. I just knew it was going to be. It had to be, right? Could you, with that page, did you ever find that scenario or that relationship that was unveiled on that page? Did it make its way into your writing ever? Did you ever utilize something you found on that page, like more concretely?
Concretely, not directly, but certainly that when I was writing Birthright, when I was writing Superman Birthright, I really leaned into the idea of how lonely he would have been as a kid. Yeah. And to me, that was always, and continuity is different here and there, and things change, and interpretations are different. But my interpretation of young Clark Kent has always hinged on there being a young Lex Luthor in Smallville, even for just a short time, because the idea of Superman Clark Kent, young Clark Kent, after being a good guy and really wanting to help the world, but being so alone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he loves Ma and Pa Kent. He doesn't feel alone per se. He knows he's loved, but they don't understand. There's certain things they don't understand. And Lex does. Lex is the only other human being on the planet whose brain works in such a way where he's such a genius. He can understand the concepts and the things that Superman feels and the things that Superman thinks about. And Superboy, I keep whatever.
Yeah.
And so that plays very heavily. That page, that sequence, that Marty stuff, like, leans very heavily into Birthright. Yeah.
Awesome. Would you say, because the thing about that page and that scenario within Superman, I also feel like as a teenager, so many people go through that feeling of alone, that, the melancholy almost of just, or the existentialism. People don't understand me. I'm unique in my own head.
Yes.
And that's incredible. I've not read the book or that particular comic. I will soon.
You will. Okay.
And the thing is I wanted to tell you, because I'm not a big Superman fan. I don't dislike the character. I've just never related to him. This is almost the most relatable thing I've ever heard for Superman.
This is one of 45 reasons in that book you will relate to this character. So
amazing.
And what you said was interesting. It's, you're right. We all have that moment especially in our teenage years, where we're like, we feel misunderstood. We feel like nobody sees the real us, that no one. That's key to Superman's appeal. Mm-hmm. I mean, people say, I can't relate to Superman. You're not supposed to relate to Superman. That's what Clark Kent is for.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what it's like to wish that, the pretty cheerleader would pay attention to them, or, whoever everybody knows what it's like to be like, the mousy librarian who wishes that the world could see that there's somebody behind those glasses. That's why Superman plugs into so many people at some point, because everybody understands the idea of, this. If this made me really look different to people, what would that be like?
That's incredible.
One of the things you said in the past is you capturing the spirit of the character and, translating it to modern. But with the character like Superman, who's been around since 1932, I think it is, or something, 35, somewhere around there.
Close enough.
38. I was close enough.
That's close enough.
And capturing that spirit of what you're talking about, as far as the teenage outcast kind of deal extent, and translating to modern, right? Like where does he go? Like, where in your mind, where does that go in the future?
Staying up to date with these characters and making them contemporary is not just a matter of dropping the words TikTok, into your script at some point, because that crap's going to age. Let's use the Archie characters as an example, because I did like 3 years working on the Archie comics with Fiona Staples. We started out with, and then a Murderer's Row of great artists after that. And the remit from Archie Comics was, please make these characters feel contemporary and real, and nothing wrong with the classic Archie characters, but they're very one-dimensional, and they're walking cartoons. Can you please give a more realistic treatment to these characters? So what I had to do was really think about these characters that were created in the 1940s, and what do you do to bring them up to speed and bring them up to date? And it wasn't about fashion, and it wasn't about, like I said, people, talking about Tide Pod challenges or crap like that. It's getting to the core of everyone remembers their first kiss, right? Like, everyone remembers the first time in school you do something that makes you look like an idiot and everybody thinks you're, everybody laughs at you. Everybody remembers the moment of triumph that you have when when you sink the basket at the 1 second mark, and win the game. So that's what you drill down on. There's certain things about being a teenager that will never change in terms of the emotional end of it. And that's what you hook on to. That's the stuff that is eternal. Fashions change, slang changes, taste change, but I contend that on an emotional level, there are certain, marks of high school or certain rites of passage in high school that will be eternal.
Very nice.
Can I answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's great. Basically, it's the core of the character basically, and then you just go from there into modern. And you're right, like that TikTok stuff and all that stuff, that it's fads, it passes, technology, gets better, gets worse, what have you. But that makes a lot of sense too. And my daughter's a huge Archie fan, by the way, and she's read your stuff.
Oh, that's nice. All right, to love.
Yeah.
With Superman, I had to face it too when I did Birthright, which your partner has not read. I will point out.
Come on, Jake.
He'll get on it. I really had to think about it because I'm working on the book. This is like 20 years ago now, and I'm trying to get a handle on what I'm going to do. And I listened to a story on NPR, and I don't remember many of the details, but I remember specifically that the story was about a guy in some small town in Oregon, Washington, whatever, who just likes wearing a Superman costume wherever he goes. And that's easy to laugh at, but it was more layered than that. It had to do with some trauma that he endured with his wife who just passed away and so forth. And it was a very touching story. What could have been a very funny story would end up being a very touching story. But the line that stuck with me from that story was the person who was, reporting the story and going around with the guy. So they went to a bar with him once, and everybody, how did they put it? It was basically everybody who was, over the age of whatever sort of recognized him and cheered. And I realized, yeah, you're right. Superman, this is 2000, 2001. Superman really is, to a lot of people, a relic of the past. And what do you do to bring that up to speed without in any way trading away the things that make Superman unique? I have to appeal to an audience that, has to go through metal detectors before they get into school, which is something I didn't have to do. And people who read Superman comics and wrote Superman comics didn't have to do. Superman was created at a time where, white picket fences were a sign of, awesome, we've made it, yay suburbia, and white picket fences now hide secrets. Sports stars, were, idols, and now a lot of them are just jerks. It's a different world. And so having to reinterpret Superman in that world made me really have to think about why you put on the suit. Why do you do this? Why do you, not just because it's the right thing to do, but there's got to be more to it than that. What is it about? Why would anybody put on a costume at this stage in history? Why would anybody do this? Why, it's heroism is different. Like anybody at the time I wrote it, I remember thinking, to modern readers, the price for heroism is getting a bullet in your head, like Martin Luther King, like JFK, like, Gandhi. So why would you do it? And that Birthright is a real exploration of why.
And so you said something really interesting in there, and I want to ask a follow-up on that is, you mentioned, how you bring it without, basically messing up the history and everything that's been done with this character. Did you at the time, or have you ever felt that weight?
Well, no, I don't feel it as much with Superman because I feel like I've got some angles that I haven't seen. But when I write Batman, that's where it's tough because, and this is absolutely true, there have been more stories told about Batman than about any other fictional character in human history, right? Yeah. I mean, Hercules has been around longer, right? But how many Hercules stories are there, really? How many Sherlock Holmes stories are there, really? But Batman So the weight of that, oh my God, and writing him in World's Finest with Superman. I mean, what do you do that's different with Batman? How do you approach that? What new Batman ideas are out there? That's much tougher. That's where I feel the weight.
I could absolutely see that. And we constantly talk about some of the struggles that it feels like, because DC has been around for so long, and their biggest characters have been around longer than a lot than some of the more modern characters or the most popular characters for Marvel even. And there does seem to be almost a heavier weight. I personally feel like Batman and Superman are the heaviest characters in comics.
Agreed.
Probably only followed by maybe, I don't know, off the top of my head, Spider-Man or
Spider-Man, I would say,
That said, though, I wanted to follow up with what I was gonna guess was your Grail.
Okay.
Because I had a guess. I was doing a little bit of research, of course, and I'm wondering, did you consider naming the Superman No Number book that you got, the
one made specifically for
the birthday party, the bar mitzvah?
That's up there. That's somewhere in a fireproof safe, that one, because that was phenomenal. It was done in like the late 80s, and it was a Superman comic commissioned specifically by some insanely rich family that wanted a Superman story with their kids as a birthday present in it. And it's only a 5-page story, but and then there's a backup, reprint. So it feels like a 32-page comic, but that's crazy. And there were like 400 copies printed because that was just that they were willing to pay that much money. I think that's amazing. There's other stuff, man. I mean, I am lucky enough to live in Los Angeles, where it is the home of many, many, many Hollywood prop makers. And so I have my Phantom Zone projector that I'm very proud of. I have, other things that I've had made for me over the years. I don't fill my house with toys so much as I really dig like screen accurate props.
Oh,
whether
cool.
They're from movies or from comics that look like you reach in the comic page and you pull it right out. So I got a lot of that stuff.
That's really sweet.
Don't steal my stuff.
I won't. I have no intentions of
it. Just a general message to your audience. Don't steal my stuff.
Yeah, please don't steal Mark Waid's stuff. And please do not steal the conspiracy collection out of my closet, or may not be in my closet. That's an inside joke about we've talked about my collection previously with our listeners, and it may or may not be in my closet. But I think that'll probably get us through the Grail Tale section. Thank you so much for sharing that. Sure. It really is a great insight, and I've now been called out by Mark Waid for not reading enough Superman, so I officially have to.
You, in all seriousness, you come back to me after you've read that, and you tell me if that changed your opinion of Superman, because I bet it did.
All right, yeah, we will talk soon about it, but. For our next segment, we've got to go into
speculation.
The speculation segment. This is the last segment of the show, and this is the one where we like to talk about books that we think might hold some value or gain some value in the near future. Some of it is based on MCU. Some of it is just based on, you could look back and say, why is that book not being collected by as many people? It's undervalued. You should pick that up. But it could really be just about anything. We also always invite people who are creators to maybe spill some beans on something that is going to be coming out, or news that could be coming out, if you have any. But you can sit and think on that for a minute, Mark. We're going to let
me sit and think
we're going to let Jesus go first.
All right, man. So I'm going to go into this from the aspect of, collecting what you like and things of that nature. When I started collecting back in 2010, I collected Venom stuff because that's what I liked. I made the Spider-Man. Apparently, I'm the villain guy, according to Jake. I like villains now or something. I don't know. That's what I like. And this is something that I've been struggling with as well, because I love Venom, but then they rewrote his history and his origin, and now so he's I guess there's a bigger bad as a symbiote, which is Null. The first appearance of Null is in Venom #3 from June 2018. The writer is Donny Cates and the artist is Ryan Stegman, and there's a few cool variants of it. And there's a lot of rumors of Null that he might be in the MCU or in the Sonyverse or what have you. And we did get some recent spoilers on the Legos from the Thor: Love and Thunder with the bad guy Gore wielding a Necro sword, and that sword is canon. It was made by Null, none other than Null. So if the Necro sword is in the MCU, maybe Null's not far behind. This book, Raw, is selling for anywhere between $150, $225, somewhere around there. I think it's a cool cover. I think it's an iconic cover. I think it's been already homaged a few times with different books. So that's my speculation. Venom #3, the first appearance of Null from 2018.
Nice. That's a good one. I'm a fan of Venom as well, so I have to agree with you on that. Mark, if you don't mind, I'm going to let you go last. I'm going to go next, if that's all right.
Be my guest.
Let's see here. I have maybe two. I guess we'll see if we make it to the other one. But the first one I wanted to bring up is World's Finest. So this one I'm speccing on specifically. So I have talked about this book on our show already, but I want to specifically talk about the slap variant or variants.
Yeah, there you go.
This is Chip Zdarsky is the artist for both of these. And so it's World's Finest #1. I'm highly recommending anybody out there, if you haven't put it on your pull list or pre-ordered this, I think it's something that should be. It comes out on March 16th, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And just from the meme recognition, I think it's immediately a speculation candidate. I think it's something fun. It's comic history being used as a joke, but also in the funnest way possible, with the two characters essentially fighting over whose name comes first on the comic.
Right.
And they're one with Superman slapping Batman and one with Batman slapping Superman, which it's kind of funny. I only ordered the Batman slapping Superman one.
The truth comes out. Truth comes out right here.
So, but
I think the one. While you're on the subject, I think the one to snag is the one with Jerry Seinfeld on it.
Oh, yes,
that's the one I love. I can't believe that DC Legal made that kind of extra effort. That it's Superman, Batman, and Jerry Seinfeld driving the Batmobile. Superheroes and Batmobiles getting coffee. That's my favorite of all of them.
That one's actually on my list as well. I am getting one of those, which is again another really phenomenal just idea to put on the cover. It seems like everybody involved must have just been having a blast coming up with this.
That's the goal of the book. It really is. Like, we're not going to do it if we're not having a bunch of fun doing it. That's from the top down. Paul Kaminsky's my editor. He's great, and he's very invested in. Let's just have as much fun as we possibly can.
Yeah. And so that does bring me to the question I was going to bring up with regards to World's Finest.
Sure.
And that is, you mentioned earlier with Ant-Man, like, you've done everything in Marvel.
Right.
And you've done everything in DC.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, like, what brought you back for World's Finest? So World's Finest was effectively, besides a few different kind of iterations, but it effectively ended in 1986.
Right.
And depending on where they put the apostrophe on it, they've had a few iterations, but effectively they ended it. So what brought Mark Waid back to do a reincarnation of World's Finest?
First of all, it was a way to do Superman. That's first and foremost. It was also, I mentioned to Kaminsky, I said, at some point, I said, that's my dream project. I just threw it out there at some point. And then a few weeks later, he called and said, funny thing, we're ending the current Superman Batman book, and there's an opening for that. What do you want to do? And the chance was so much fun because the like I said, the remit, the edict from DC was, don't feel tied into current continuity, because if you start doing that with a team book like Superman, Batman, then you have to account for the fact that Superman's off the planet and Batman's over here. And then, it's very hard to make it tie into both series continuity. So take it out of continuity, put it a few years in the past, give us classic versions of these characters where you've got the Batcave and Alfred and Clark's The Secret Identity and everybody's wearing trunks and stuff. So that was a big part of the appeal. And then a third big part of the appeal was this gives me a chance to do things in every issue that I've never seen before. Like my favorite example is in issue 2, there is a conversation between Supergirl, a long conversation and a team up between Supergirl and Robin. I can't believe that in, do the math, 140 years of combined history, we have never seen Supergirl and Robin team up. We have never even seen a conversation between Dick Grayson and Supergirl.
Really?
Ever. I was amazed. So that alone is a reason to do that. And then it ended up being an integral part of the story and a lot of fun, because the great thing about doing a team up book or a team book is I don't own Superman. I don't own Batman, because whoever's writing those characters in the main books, they sort of own that character in terms of guiding them, right? But what I get to own in Superman Batman is I get to own the Superman Batman relationship and define that on my terms. I get to own the Supergirl Robin relationship.
Yep.
And then on top of that, I'm asked why the Doom Patrol is showing up in the first story arc, and the answer is because I've never seen Batman and the Doom Patrol together. That's a good reason right there. So I'm looking for combos. I'm looking for character combos and hero villain combinations that you've never seen before. It's something I do in my work pretty regularly. If you look back, I mean, Daredevil fighting, Claw, Master of Sound, or Captain America fighting Kang or whatever. I always like doing Kazar fighting whoever. Thanos. I like finding the angles you've never seen before.
That's awesome. That is really cool, and I think that's if that wasn't reason enough to go out and pick up World's Finest, I genuinely also would say I do think there's plenty of speculation value to these books for future you, right?
Yeah.
For the future reader out there, you could get a couple, one for yours to read, and then one to save if you want to speculate on that. At least that's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Mark, before we get into our final questions phase, right. Do you have a spec book or some sort of a secret you want to release about something?
I'm not good at this. I'm really not good at this, because I'm the guy who never even bagged his comics. I just want to read it. It doesn't have to be nice. If I want to eat off of it, I'll buy a plate, and it doesn't have to be that nice. But that said, we were talking the other day, so a few of us, and we realized the question came up, what was Titania's first appearance? Because she's going to be big on the She-Hulk TV show.
Yeah.
And for a moment, you even stumped the band with me that I didn't know, but I realized it was Secret Wars #3. If you've got a Secret Wars 3 hanging out, I would take good care of that, I would think, in the months to come. And then in terms of other stuff, without being self-serving, I would hang on to my copies of Irredeemable and track down more copies of Irredeemable if I were you. And I cannot specifically say why, but there are reasons beyond me wanting you to read it. That's all I can say.
Oh man, Mark, I don't know if you can see my face. I'm so excited right now because that was my last question. And by the way, you played the game perfectly. You're great at it. You're probably better at it than Jesus and I already. But we've always said, you want to be a good speculator, read the comics. That's to me, that really is the best way to speculate. But I'm going to move into, we'll call it final questions phase, because I wasn't going to get away without asking you about Irredeemable. Yeah. And here's the thing. I told you earlier, I was going around asking people what they thought their quintessential Mark Waid was. If you were to ask me, if anybody were to ask me, it's Irredeemable. It came to me at a time where I collected comics in the 90s as a child, and literally I was, 10, 11 years old kind of thing. And then I gave up comic books for girls, and then I came back to comic books. And when I came back to comic books, I came back to Irredeemable. And
Cool.
it really irredeemable. And then I rolled into a few other stories like American Vampire and some other ones that really shaped what I collect and what I like to read now. But Irredeemable absolutely blew my mind from the beginning all the way through the end. And the Incorruptible, I was a kid in a candy store when I had both of those characters. So I was going to ask you specifically if you could tell us any more, because I know 20th Century Fox had it back in 2016, but it kind
and
of
then Disney bought everything, so
Yeah.
that came off the tape because Disney said we don't need superheroes, we have superheroes. But all I will tell you is that you were headed for a world of joy, and that's all I can tell you.
That's okay.
Dang it! I don't like. Jake
I already
with
have
joy.
all the books. I already have them all, so I'm thrilled. But okay. So the other thing that I would ask then with regards to Irredeemable, just if I can geek out for just 1 minute, is what did you enjoy better? Taking the Superman level character, the Plutonian, and bringing him down, having him become the villain. So taking your Superman, making him the villain, or taking the super villain, Max Damage, and turning him into the hero. What was more fun for you?
By a hair, it was taking the Plutonian and making him evil. But because the Incorruptible stuff was a lot of fun too. But the challenge with doing Plutonian, this is before in the Invincible cartoon show. This is before the Boys TV show. It was the fun of it was not just, hey, what if Superman was evil?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's low hanging fruit. You know what? Mm-hmm. Anybody can write that story. And I always say you never write a story that the audience can write itself,
Mm-hmm.
So the question became not just, okay, the hook is what if Superman were evil, but then the 30 issue story, right, is, okay, why is this? What would make someone do this? What would turn someone like this? And doing a really layered introspective look at that character and his psyche, and I think really putting a lot of flesh on those bones. So that was fun.
Awesome. Yeah. I love the story. Thank you so much for indulging me in that question. Because
villains.
Man, I love that. Jesus, I'll let you take your last question.
Yeah, I have I guess 2 quick questions more about the craft. You being a publisher for Humanoids now and taking into consideration all your knowledge and experience, everything you've done, what would your advice be to, say a new writer nowadays, like right now, from a story and from a breaking into the industry perspective? I know you've done, I think the update on the how to draw the Marvel way and stuff like that, but just in your experience, story, and then to break into the industry.
Yeah. 2 different stories, 2 different questions. What's, about writing and about breaking in the art in business. So let's take the story one first. Know what a story is. I mean, if you take, I do classes, and if you take nothing away from my classes, I want you to take away that you have to remember that every single scene in your story has to be connected by one of 2 words, has to be connected by either however or therefore. All right. In other words, this scene has to logically flow into this scene, and this scene would not exist if this other thing hadn't happened. You can't just pile on a bunch of things that are happening at random, because then it's like a kid telling a joke, right? And then, and that's not a story. I mean, I fall prey to it sometimes myself. I was writing a story a few months ago, and it was kind of a quest story. It was kind of like a treasure hunt story. They got to go here, they got to go here, they got to go here. And in my outline, it was kind of random, but it didn't really matter to me. But as I was writing the story, I was like site A, and I needed them to get to site B because that's from my outline. But I realized, well, there's no logical reason for them to go from here to here, but there is a logical reason, looking further ahead in my outline, for them to go from here to what, point D is. So just switch them up and then create that, that logical flow between the scenes. So it's either however, or therefore. Meanwhile, also, but even meanwhile you can do, but even once you branch off into a meanwhile, someone shows up at Peter Parker's place of business pretending to be his dad. Even when you meanwhile, that storyline also has to have therefore or however. Okay. That's a lot of information. The other thing I would tell you is what I said earlier, which is never write a story that the audience can write for you. So that's a craft level. On an art level, I mean, it is harder. However, there are sites, I'm told, I wish I had better examples, that where writers can meet artists can meet writers, and so forth. There's Facebook groups, there's internet groups. I would encourage you to, if you're a writer, see if you can find someone who you can, feel comfortable working with as an artist. And if they are looking for a writer, because the beauty of breaking in is that it's, in a lot of ways, it's easier than it ever has been. It's the internet. Internet has democratized comics so that if you want to do a comic, then just do a comic and put it on your site. And guess what? You're in comics. You don't have to go through submissions editors and go to conventions and do a portfolio review and hope somebody can take 6 seconds to look at your work. And, this is just do comics, man. And I'll tell you, DC and Marvel both, and a lot of the other companies look for that stuff. They're paying close attention to webcomics, paying close attention to digital stuff, because they know that's where the next wave of talent's coming from. And if you're doing it yourself or with a partner on your own website or wherever, that's a good audition piece for you. But if you do it on a regular basis, like I can, as a publisher, I'll see something I like and oh, that looks like these people have real potential and talent. I should look into it. But then if I look and see that they've been doing it every week or every month or whatever on a regular basis for 6 or 8 months, that tells me something else. It tells me they got a work ethic. That tells me I can count on them, and they understand deadlines. They understand responsibility. And so that gives them a leg up, right? So if you're going online, if you're doing your own digital comics, don't screw around with it. Chunk it out and do it. Take it like a serious job, because people who are looking at it are going to see whether or not you're committed.
They'll see more than just the surface level, more than just
exactly.
Nice.
So that's my advice.
Awesome. Great advice. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I believe that is going to do it for this episode of Spec Tales. I had one last note that I wanted to, for you, Mark, I wanted to just say, since you are Humanoids, or you're the publisher, I wanted to say this month, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but March 9th, Space Bastards Volume 2 comes out. I am excited about that one. And then here's one I'm excited for, but it's just intriguing because I don't know a whole lot about it. But March 16th, Asphalt Blues is coming out. And that one, the visuals look amazing.
Beautiful looking book. It was published by our French office, and we took one look at it and said, we need this translated and printed over here.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you very much for coming on the episode. This has been a dream come true for us. So thank you.
Yes.
No, my pleasure. I'm glad I was able to entertain. So, all right, I will go shuffle off and do my little porpoise dance somewhere else, and enjoy Superman, Batman, World's Finest. I'm glad you're digging it, and we will talk again once you've read Birthright.
Oh, I will be following up with you, Mr. Waid. Yeah, that's gonna do
I'll
it.
make sure.
That'll do it for this episode of Spec Tales. Thanks everybody out there for listening. You can find us on Twitter at Spec Tales Pod, and on Instagram, Spec_Tales Podcast. That's it. Thanks everybody.